start with how we got here, Congressman, and your thoughts on how this day could have been averted.
We got here, it's very interesting, Matt, a Democrat, Galileo, is the one who said that the weakness began with Obama, and he's absolutely right. When we should have been sending lethal aid way back then, we sent, blankets. And, of course, that set the tone. That's back when Biden was the vice president. Of course, in 2014, Crimea. Fast forward to August of last year, the incredible weakness that was shown with the withdrawal from Afghanistan, that debacle, that failure showed an incredibly weak commander-in-chief of the United States, and Putin was watching. I was in NATO headquarters talking to the Baltic state and the Polish representatives with a group of Democrats and Republicans, and one of those guys, I won't dime out who said it, but one of those NATO reps said, "We are here because of weakness in August." And you know what he's talking about. He's talking about that failure. And in the build-up to this, I thought Biden had learned his lesson. He's talking about crippling sanctions. He's talking about he's moving American forces to NATO countries. No, we slap them on the wrist with sanctions on just the area that they're talking about going into, and then we sanction a couple of banks and a few oligarchs, and then who knows what else is coming. Hopefully, we'll bring out the big stick here and push back on a totalitarian regime that has invaded another Western democracy and or invaded this country further. They had already invaded them. This is just weakness is provocation to someone like Putin. Xi Jinping, of course, we know China flew 16 fighter jets into Taiwanese airspace today. The Taiwanese have got to be petrified. I have friends in Ukraine. We're texting as much as we can. This is just horrible. And it all rests, just like Afghanistan, on the shoulders of Joe Biden.
So the president today, and you alluded to it, Congressman, he announces further sanctions against a few more banks. And even media that are predisposed to be compliant and bow subservient to the president of the United States seemed a little exacerbated based on his response to their questioning why he isn't going further, why he hasn't gone to SWIFT, the International Monetary Transfer Fund, why he hasn't personally sanctioned Putin. If all we've got are sanctions, which I believe that is all we have, we unfortunately he's boxed us into a corner where that's ultimately the only response we have, but he's not even committed to doing that. And one of the reporters, I think it was from NBC News, Congressman, said, "What are you waiting for?" I mean, and I think the rest of America and the rest of the world are asking that of the president. What is he waiting for?
I can't answer the question because, I would have done the SWIFT transactions already. So I don't get it. It makes no sense to me. Russia shouldn't be able to buy and sell a single thing on the system that the United States put together for the world. It should be shut down immediately.
Let's talk about immediate concerns for Middle Tennessee, Congressman. Congressman Mark Green with us, by the way, responding to the actions of Vladimir Putin and the reaction by the President of the United States earlier today. So he brought up cybersecurity and the potential for cyber attacks. I lived in Alabama at the time of the Colonial Pipeline attack, and I saw the results of that Colonial Pipeline attack directly. I saw the pipeline itself. So I understand what this can mean when cybersecurity is compromised. Do you fear that that is either on the horizon or is happening right now?
Absolutely. I think we tied, attribution in cyber warfare is very difficult, but for that particular attack, they are reasonably assured that it came from quote-unquote criminal elements within Russia. And look, they are at least at a minimum allowed to be there by Vladimir Putin if they're not supported by various military specific cyber units in the Russian military. We know for a fact the attacks on Ukraine preceding the kinetic attack last night were from Russia. And absolutely, we should be able to anticipate that. I talked to the Tennessee Bankers Association about this. They were leaning forward in the saddle weeks ago because they're smart businessmen. They're protecting Tennessee banks against this. And so all of America needs to be leaning as far forward as the TBA. Hopefully CISA is doing just that on the Homeland Security front.
Congressman, Pamela Furr, our news person, and I were talking a little earlier about Fort Campbell and the deployment, and she was helping educate me on what that has to do with Tennessee and the fact that so many families of the deployed live in northern Tennessee. Are you fearful that we're going to see more and more troops? We heard about 7,000 more deployed into that region of the world. They talk about not having boots on the ground out of the White House. I don't know that there's any appetite for that necessarily right now. At the same time, we see more and more American troops and even troops from here in Middle Tennessee moving that way. Are you fearful of an increased deployment and an increased presence overseas by American troops?
Well, of course, fearful is a
well, not fear. That's the wrong word, but you understand what I'm saying.
I think I anticipate that happening. I'm not opposed to that happening. This is the one thing Vladimir Putin doesn't want is more troops on his border. And us moving more over there shows a degree of resolve to protect our NATO allies. It communicates to our NATO allies, we're with you. We have an Article 5 obligation there. It's a treaty. It's the law of the land, as our Constitution says. They certainly came. When I was in Iraq and Afghanistan, there were Poles there. I actually rescued British SAS soldiers who were wounded on a battlefield that were there because we were attacked. And so, look, I am all for that. Am I fearful? I have a son in the Army. Sure, I have the fear of a father whose young son may deploy to this region. But at the same time, in my role, I think it's the right thing to do. So fearful is a quantifiable term.
You've been to Kyiv, correct?
Yeah, I just got back from Kyiv.
What do the Ukrainians there tell you about what they want for their nation? I mean, obviously, that might be out of their reach now, but what were they saying on the ground?
What they were saying on the ground, actually, it was interesting. We met with, of course, we interacted with the populace, cab drivers, and I have friends over there. I have a guy that has a buddy who has 11 stores in Ukraine, and so went out and had dinner with him and caught up with what's going on. But we also met with the defense minister, and then we met with the foreign minister, and then we met with Zelensky. And if you look at the official level, they were each asking for something a little bit different. Of course, the defense minister wanted javelins. He wanted stingers. He wanted body armor. They wanted command and control software. The foreign minister wanted currency support, and Zelensky wanted cyber defense. So in each of those meetings, they listed different things. We wrote them down. We brought them back. But the people, the leadership, none of them want American troops. They know they can fight this battle. They have the resolve. They just need the equipment. And we, of course, have lots of that to give them. So I think we should. But we should not put boots on the ground in Ukraine. We don't have an obligation, and they don't want it. They want to fight the battle themselves.